I want to welcome everyone to tonight's very special program. And this is a screening of The People vs. Agent Orange, and it will be followed by a panel discussion. And I want to urge everyone to stay for that discussion. My name is Raymond Latta. I am the spokesperson for Revolution Books here in Harlem. I'm a political economist, and I am an advocate for the new communism developed by Bob Avakian, the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian, and this is the framework for making a truly liberatory revolution in today's world. And you are here at Revolution Books, which is the political, intellectual, and cultural center of a movement for a real revolution. And we like to say here at Revolution Books, drawing from Bob Avakian's work, that there are three things that need to happen in order for there to be positive and lasting change for the better. And that is, one, people need to confront the real history of this country and its role in the world today and the terrible consequences of that. Two, people need to dig into, scientifically and seriously, the capitalist imperialist system, the nature and ways of functioning of this capitalist imperialist system, and what that means and what that does to the people of this planet. And three, people need to dig into the real solution to all of this, which is an all-the-way revolution to overthrow this system and bring into being a society and world worthy of our humanity. And that's a revolution guided by the new communism brought forth by Bob Avakian. And guess what? This bookstore is a resource to help you deal with, learn about, get into all of these issues about the true history of this country, its role in the world, the nature of this system, and the revolutionary way out. So this is just another way of saying, welcome to Revolution Books and tonight's program. Now, after the program, as I said, we're going to have a panel discussion, but I want to preview who's going to be on that panel. We have the two directors of this incredible film here tonight, and that's Alan Adelson and Kate Taverna. We have Huang Minh Vu, who is an historian and who is a faculty member in history and Vietnam studies at Fulbright University in Vietnam, and who has been, for the last year, if I'm correct, a visiting scholar at Columbia University. And we have Carl Dix, who is a longtime revolutionary leader and is a voice for the New York chapter of the RevCom Corps for the emancipation of humanity. And he is someone whose history you will hear about that bears very directly on what this film is telling you. His experience refusing to fight in the war in Vietnam. Okay? So that's the agenda for tonight, and we're going to have, it hadn't been finally decided when we first talked, we're going to have one of the, Alan Adelson, one of the directors of the film. Alan and Kate made this film, and they're fighting among themselves as to who's going to come up to introduce it, but I think it's now settled. So I'm going to introduce Alan to introduce the film, and then we're going to go straight to this remarkable documentary. So thank you for coming out, and stay for the discussion.
Hi, everyone. Well, kind of sold out performance here, which is most impressive. Thanks so much for coming out. I'm going to be very brief. You're going to see an astonishing film. It's astonishing because it shows the corporate powers that prevail over America poisoning our own population. And when it comes down to selling the people's health out in favor of profits, you're dealing with a horrifying structure, and one that warrants and probably necessitates revolution. I take that back, not probably, absolutely necessitates revolution. A little tiny bit of civic guidance and what to watch for. You'll see America's ruthless genocidal war against the Vietnamese and the use, almost brand new use of a chemical poison called Agent Orange. What may surprise you is that that same poisonous herbicide was brought back to the United States and has been used widely in the timber industry and in agriculture. You will see a segment of the film in which a community in Oregon, Lincoln County, Oregon, voted after a huge struggle against big money lying advertisements. They voted to ban the use of toxic herbicides, especially when they're being sprayed by helicopters, aerial spraying of toxic herbicides, and against a hugely funded campaign which the chemical companies carried on. The people who were so upset and concerned and in need of protecting their community, they beat the corporations at the ballot box, but it didn't work. And this is where I think the need for revolution is fundamentally displayed in the film. The courts, abiding by the corporations and their influence, overturned the people's election, the people's ban, and to this day, toxic herbicides are being sprayed in that community, and people are getting sick and sick and sick. Enjoy the film if you can, at least on the basis of the insights we hope you'll take away, and we look forward to discussing all of this with you in about an hour and 20 minutes, Kate? 80 minutes. Okay, thanks.
There were these helicopters flying over the ridge, spraying something, and they didn't even see the kids. That night, they were all really sick. We called the Forest Service, and they said, oh no, it's perfectly safe. It was a mixture of 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T, Agent Orange, and it's still going on.
And here he comes, I gotta reload him. This stuff is nasty stuff. My throat is burning.
Tumors, miscarriages, birth defects.
It was banned in Vietnam, and nobody realized that the same chemicals were being used here.
It was the most destructive instance of chemical warfare in modern history.
Je suis née pendant la guerre, je vis dans la guerre, et maintenant aussi on est en guerre.
The powers that be went to great lengths to deny any effect from Agent Orange.
They knew that it contained a poison, and they knew the effects could be devastating.
They sprayed people!
The attack is not scientific, it's purely emotional.
There was information that was withheld, distortions. It was tantamount to a cover-up.
Our phones were being tapped. Documents disappearing.
We were being followed by guys in suits.
They said, you know at all times where your children are.
Je pense que peut-être on m'a donné une mission à accomplir.
This became a real David and Goliath act.
Somebody's gonna pay.
There was something going on.
How can something like that disappear?
I was getting so angry.
They had done the absolute worst thing anybody could do to me. They couldn't do any more.
Je consacre mes dernières forces pour que ça gagne, pour que justice soit faite.
So let's hear comments from the people on the stage. Who wants to go?
That was my comment.
Okay. Alan, do you want to say anything more? And then we'll hear from Huang, and then we'll hear from Carl.
Almost nothing more to add. I can just relate that the Washington Post 2 months ago listed Carol Van Strum's A Bitter Fog as one of the 10 best environmental books ever published. Wow. She's really, and she is, both of these women, as Kate said, are so heroic and so inspiring. And for us to have had the opportunity to work with them has been just an extraordinary and strengthening experience for us, to understand the strength and resilience and courage that it takes to hang in there and fight against incredible invested power to do right and not to give up, never to give up, as they're each expressing in the film, has been an extraordinary inspiration for us.
Life-changing to have those women in our lives. In fact, Carol continues to send us dried apples and fruit produce from her garden. We get polenta from a seed of 1968 vintage polenta. It's pure. She's incredible.
So we'll hear from Huang, okay?
I also don't really have much to add. I want to prioritize the time for questions from the audience. I know we'll say a lot more from that. I just have my own question, if I may, to Carl, because I have to say today is Juneteenth, right? Today is a very important day, and I put this question to you at dinner, and I asked if it's okay for me to ask this, but could you tell us a bit more about your decision to resist going to Vietnam from a sort of intersectional perspective, from your did your own being as a black man in America, did that affect anything? I should also say I live really close to Riverside Church in Harlem, and we're very close to Riverside Church, where 1967, of course, Dr. Martin Luther King gave a very, very important and brave speech coming out pretty early, I would say, 67, compared to most other anti-war leaders and movements against the war in Vietnam. So, yeah.
Okay. I mean, look, I was drafted in 1968 and got my orders to go to Vietnam 1969. And it was a combination of things. The first was when I got those orders, I figured I had to figure out whether this was a war I could be part of, which was probably my first military transgression, because you get orders, you're supposed to carry them out. And I was like, what are these orders telling me to do? And I talked to every GI who had been into Vietnam that I could find. And what I got from them was that this was a war where everybody was the enemy. Men, women, children. You had to kill them all. And I got this from GIs who weren't so high on the Vietnam War, and also from GIs who liked the Vietnam War and enjoyed their participation in it. And I got the sense that that must be what it really was. And then I had to say, well, could I be part of that? And here I was in the United States, somebody who had not been active at all around any of the things that was going on, but seeing them all. And it was actually a statement from someone who came out against the Vietnam War earlier than Dr. King, and that was Stokely Carmichael, that really influenced me. And he said, this is as close as I can remember it, ain't no good reason for no black man to go over to Vietnam and kill yellow people for the white man. And it was like, what kind of fool would I be to go and fight because this government is telling me, lying to me, that it's about freedom when they ain't giving up no freedom here. And that's what led me to decide that I could not go. I could not be a part of this war. I also turned down the opportunity to be part of about a dozen GIs who were going to Canada to avoid going to prison. I said, I have to stay here and stand up and do this. And 5 other GIs did it with me. That was the Fort Lewis 6. We were the largest mass refusal. And it was important that this kind of resistance was mounted to that war. I mean, and look, the main reason that stopped the war in Vietnam was that the Vietnamese military kicked the ass of the U.S. military. That was the main part of it. But the resistance in this country was a contributing factor, and that was important. Now, here we are today, watching this film, and it's really timely. I mean, frankly, it's timely because the way things are going right now, the planet is being dragged to the edge of climate devastation and possible human extinction. That's a part of it. Another part of it is we're facing another genocidal war. This time it's in Gaza, waged by the Israeli Zionist state with the full backing of the United States and its global empire. And there are important lessons from the 1960s that have to be brought to bear here. One is we got to fight to stop this genocide. Right. Important resistance has already been waged, and that's got to continue. It's got to develop, deepen, broaden, and all like that, because we got to stop this. People should not be being slaughtered. Schools and hospitals should not be being destroyed, and starvation should not be being enforced, and all of that's going down with the U.S. government being the main backer for all of that. That's got to stop. With the genocidal war then, another genocidal war now, attacks on people's rights then, attacks on people's rights today, there's a common denominator there. Because one thing we learned back in the 1960s is that the source of the problem was not bad policy decisions by the powers that be, or that we had the wrong people in office, and if we just elected some other people, they would do something different. No, it was that this was a system that operated in a certain way, and that operation of that system dragged the world towards war, launched attacks on people, plundered parts of the world. That system is imperialism, and it is still in effect, and that's still what we're dealing with. And look, imperialism can be dealt with. It can be overthrown through a real revolution. That's what was needed then, and some of us tried to do that then, because in fact, I got sent to Leavenworth Military Penitentiary for refusing to go to Vietnam, got out 2 years later, looking for the revolution and connecting up with it. And I've been working for a revolution ever since. We need that, and we have some things today that we didn't have back in the 1960s. One is we have leadership that we didn't have. The revolutionary leader who I've also followed, that Raymond Lotta talked about at the beginning, Bob Avakian, has developed a strategy for making revolution in this country. And he's taken the understanding of making revolution and bringing a totally different world into being onto a more scientific basis than it's ever been. So we have leadership that we didn't have, and I really encourage people to check out Bob Avakian Official. I don't know if that was in...
People will get that when they leave.
Yeah, but I was going to say, we've got that here. People should get it. Scan that QR code and check out what he has to say. You got to get to know this revolutionary leader. And we also have the fact that this is a time when the normal operation of society is being torn apart. You got the war criminal Democrats and the fascist Republicans at each other's throats. And people are being confronted with things that they don't usually have to think about, that they can usually ignore or avoid, but it ain't happening. They have to deal with this stuff. And that means that they're open to thinking differently about things, and on that basis acting differently. They're not going to spontaneously necessarily do that. It's going to take the work of revolutionaries, and that's the other aspect of Avakian's leadership. He's been leading a movement for a real revolution. And the RevCom Corps for the Emancipation of Humanity that I'm a representative of takes its leadership from Bob Avakian and works on the basis of the new communism that he's developed. So these two important things we have, and they need to be wielded. And we invite people to, those of us wearing this Revolution, BA Speaks Revolution Nothing Less t-shirt, we're in the RevCom Corps. We invite you to talk with us, find out what we're doing. Revolution Summer 2024, a very important effort to spread the message of the revolution and grow the forces for revolution to be in position as things escalate and possibly an all-out crisis develops. We need to have thousands of people acting for revolution who can lead millions if such a crisis develops, and it could develop very soon, quite likely in the months to come as this election heats up and all that other stuff. So I want to stop there because I just want to stop because I kind of saw myself going on, and I said, no, I don't want to do that.
All right, we're going to open it up to the audience right away. Who's going to field the microphone? Okay, you can ask your questions. You have comments, experience you would like to bring to bear. It's all open to you.
First of all, thank you.
Wait, I don't think it's on.
Turn it up a little bit, though. Okay, thank you, Alan and Kate, if I may call you by your first name. It's an extraordinary documentary. And I have to thank Stephanie, who's somewhere here, because she told me about it. And I feel like I need to connect you with someone named Pat Elder. He is working with the Veterans for Peace Military Toxins Unit. Do you know about it?
I know of Veterans for Peace very well and respect them deeply, but I don't know about this toxic unit.
Yeah, well, he's been dealing with, the PCBs and the PCAs and all that whole set of things. Also with Agent Orange. And he is trying to pin down the Pentagon to admit that, yes, it was in Fort Ord in California and this, all the different bases. Right. Pentagon is refusing, but he's going at it, he will be in Japan and Okinawa this summer, but I would love to connect you somehow. Yeah. Now, my question is this. At the start of the film, it said Arte, which I know from French filmmakers, and PBS. Yeah. So what is the history?
Oh, this was a co-production between PBS Independent Lens and Arte, France and Germany. And I had to cut 3 versions of this film. There was a 54-minute for the European, France and Germany would put in French and German. There was the 84-minute for PBS. That's not this. This is the feature length, which has the 3 minutes of credit. I spared you from that. And that's the long version. So they more or less paid, and Alan did a tremendous amount of, what do you want to call that, producing, fundraising, that awful word, for the first year or 2 of our production, because we couldn't get broadcasters. We had to make something. We had to I made 28 samplers of various lengths, and he got foundation money that kept us going until we got PBS and ITBS. ITBS
and I work
money.
for free.
Is that true?
I'm just kidding.
Who is the distributor for it?
Well, PBS Video is doing our video distribution. There's a place called Collective Eye that's doing educational distribution. What else? Isn't there another one?
It's available. It's not working.
Okay.
It's available also on Amazon, and only this week we received an inquiry from our kind of television distributor who is based in Spain, asking if we could get PBS to roll back their hold on the film so that it can be distributed in all manner of
video on demand,
video VOD or HVOD around the world. The film has had a remarkably good life, and it seems to touch people intellectually, politically, and emotionally. And I still feel quite proud of it.
Oh, I'm so happy.
How did it look to you?
You guys made it a wonderful experience for me. I've seen it thousands of times, but I saw it for the first time again because of you. I'm serious. You moved me. You were so reactive. But this showed on PBS in 2021, June actually, just about this time in 2021. So the fact that it has this afterburn, this afterlife, this shelf life, is just super.
And just to add to that, you guys remember 2021, right?
Yes, this was the bad news movie during Pandemania. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so, I mean, yeah, just all the theaters were like open, but you get like a link, right? So, so this is, I mean, the screening. Yeah, I tried. We did a screening at Fulbright University, Vietnam. We did a screening at Columbia recently, and yeah, so like these. The ability to have in-person screening and to be able to see the audience react to the film.
Because it opened in 41 theaters across the country, but streaming. Yeah, right. So we didn't get to see anything. And the remarkable thing was that the people of Oregon organized a campaign to pay more money. Instead of paying $12 was terrible to charge someone to stream the movie, and they started giving $20 and $30 to pay for veterans and people who couldn't afford the $12. So they were amassing this little pot of money to pay going forward, even outside of Oregon, when it got to California, all these other places. We had extra money to cover people who couldn't afford the full price ticket. Those people in Oregon, man, they're amazing.
So other comments, questions?
Hello, everyone. My name is Stacy, and
Louder,
can you hear me? Yeah?
Yes.
That's good. Okay. My name is Stacy, and I want to thank you for bringing this to the public's attention by way of your documentary. I have to say, in 2007, I backpacked the entire length of Vietnam. I was in Southeast Asia for a little over a month, and backpacked from Hanoi down to Can Tho in the Mekong Delta. And of all of my experiences in Vietnam and ultimately in Cambodia and then again in Thailand, what seared in my brain, what stands out for me even till this day, and this was back in 2007 that I traveled, was the children in Hanoi, and it still chokes me up, the deformity, the blind children of Hanoi, using what appeared to be like skateboards because they were limbless, they were blind, they had no fingers. And I didn't put it together that was the effect of Agent Orange when I was there. At some point in my travels, I was taken to an orphanage where older teenage and young adults who also were deformed were in this orphanage and really used, I would say, to make silk woven artwork, which is beautiful. I have it till this day. It was heart-wrenching. When I think of my travels through Vietnam, that's what stands out for me. And so my question is, I often wonder, because when I was in Hanoi, as I traveled, the reception that I received as I traveled was very different in northern Vietnam as compared to when I got down to the Mekong Delta, southern Vietnam. I often wonder now that I know what it is by way of documentaries like yours, the research that I did on my own, is some of the animosity that I experienced in particularly northern Vietnam, does that have to do with the rage that the Vietnamese must feel toward this government for what continues to go on with their children? Their rice paddies continue to be contaminated, their water systems continue to be contaminated, and I saw the effects of that with my very eyes in 2007. And I can't imagine that some of the animosity, the cold reception that I received, that I experienced in northern Vietnam in particular, has to do not only with the political climate between the two countries, but what this country has done to their children, and that they continue to see that even now. So what is, if there's anyone who could speak to that, is that what is the emotional impact of the Vietnamese of what is going on because of the lasting impact of Agent Orange on their children? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for sharing. And I have to say, I'm sorry that you had such experiences of animosity. It's I don't know, because Alan, Kate, you've visited Vietnam. Alan did, right? Did you face any animosity in your time? In northern Vietnam.
It was interesting how as I moved through central Vietnam, Hue, and ultimately down into the Mekong Delta. So there was, and maybe animosity might be too strong of a word, but certainly I did not feel the warmth or the willingness to engage me as I did as I moved further south in central Vietnam and southern Vietnam. Northern Vietnam, there was no interaction at all. That was not welcomed. In southern Vietnam, I did feel more of that, although there was some resentment to it. And I spoke with a number of people down in southern Vietnam, and they explained it, that the northern Vietnamese are not too keen about the Americans. Down here, we don't really like you, but we tolerate you.
Like the Italians.
It's interesting for me to be able to recount to all of you how extraordinarily helpful and friendly the Vietnamese, both North and South, were to us in our work. I thought there was a fervent wish expressed explicitly from many to get the story out. The story of their suffering, the story of their present burden, the story of their struggle to overcome imperialism and the assault on their country that the United States had perpetrated. I went with profound self-consciousness. I obviously could not in any meaningful way apologize for the atrocities that my country people had perpetrated on them, but the intention of sharing their experience through the film made me an ally, I think, in many of their eyes. And I'm inspired by your account. I do want to observe this one other thing. During an event that was intended by the Vietnamese government and local organizations, an event that was intended to celebrate the unity of the North and South in Vietnam, kind of reverberated in a way that went well beyond what was anticipated. And I mistakenly spoke up and tried to refer to the parallel that American society has experienced coming out of our Civil War. And I was chastened by a number of people in that audience that they do not consider the conflict between the North and South in Vietnam as a civil war. Instead, they considered it two different populations' reactions and attempts to cope with the threat and problem that American society had imposed. I'm really curious, Wong, what you would have to say about all this.
Well, first of all, yeah, thank you both for your sharing, and I don't want to disqualify either of your experiences. I think it's completely normal that different people coming at different times, will and meeting different people will have different personal experiences. Some of what you said, it plays into some of the stereotypes, and stereotypes are problematic, but they also come from a little truth somewhere, where Northerners may present as being a bit colder. Just like in America, you have this thing where East Coast, West Coast, right? East Coast people might seem a bit colder, but if you are in real trouble, a New Yorker, will come and help you, right? West Coast people are very nice, but maybe they don't. Yeah, these are stereotypes. These are stereotypes. They're stereotypes. So in Vietnam, we have sort of the same thing about Northern and Southerners. So maybe that's part of the presentation. I think, in most of Vietnam doesn't really have the same sort of Gallup polls that you have here for political reasons. But there have been some polls of elites, at least, and more informal polls, where Vietnam, out of all the Southeast Asian countries, is by far like the most pro-American country in terms of public opinion. And I just anecdotally, I see that sort of everywhere around, especially the big cities. I think the areas that maybe still have more resentment towards Americans even today, two main areas. One is around, which is deep in the Delta. So like Cần Thơ is still a big city, but you go deep into the Delta, that would have been controlled mainly by the NLF. And those guys were, Agent Orange, free fire zones, like those areas were absolutely, bombed to death as well. So napalm, that's another big one, right? So, and the other area is around the 17th parallel itself, where it was like very, very intense bombing and spraying and all of that. So those guys, I would say, are even more communist than the Hanoians, which I come from. I'm a Hanoian who married a southern, Saigon girl. So I think that yeah.
I think that the gentleman, I'm sorry, I forget.
Alan.
Alan.
Yeah.
I think you raised a good point, and as do you, that it's the intention with which we travel. And so that for the Vietnamese to know the reason that you were there, which is to bring to light, to bring to the public attention what has happened to their country, I could see that they might be more receptive, particularly in the North, than what I felt. And hey, maybe I'm projecting some of my own stuff because I was there by myself, and I was there as not necessarily a nosy American, but to really look into the reasons why I remember as a child, my parents being so incensed with what was going on. And it was a fascination that they planted in my brain when I was 10, 11 years old. And I held that until I was old enough to actually go to Vietnam and see, what was Mom and Dad so upset about every night? And that was the impetus for me to go to Vietnam, which was a very different reason why you went. And I'm sure that might have flavored some of the difference in the reactions or responses that we received.
And on the question of civil war or not, I think I don't think you were wrong there, Alan. I think there are many. It is both an international war, right? It's a war that's part of the Cold War. It's part of an ideological struggle. It's also partly a civil war as well between North and South that divided families. Every single Vietnamese family would have members who joined different sides and made different decisions and would have lost people on both sides. So in many ways, I think there are real parallels, but it is a sensitive topic in Vietnam, and Vietnam is a big country. It's actually 100 million people, so just like a third of the U.S. population. So it has people who think all sorts of different things. So that's completely normal as well.
Yeah. Just quickly. Yeah, and I really appreciate the different experiences people are sharing with us. But I really think it's essential that we come back to the basic fact that this was an unjust genocidal war. And let's, look, this is 10 years of aerial spraying of Agent Orange. By some estimates, it was 4.5 million acres of land. The size of Connecticut. Huh? Yeah, exactly. And 2 to 3 million Vietnamese people were killed, in consequence of the U.S. imperialist aggression and war against the people of Vietnam. So, the level of destruction, I'd have to say this, if there only one reason that we need to make revolution in the United States, it's to prevent something like that from happening again, and it's built in to this system of capitalism, imperialism, because we can spend a whole night and more going through the wars that the U.S. has waged since 1975 and the end of the war in Vietnam. And we could go to Central America, Iraq, Afghanistan. And as Carl pointed out, what's happening, in Gaza, right? So, the U.S. is continuing. This is U.S. imperialism. Is continuing to carry out, incredible atrocities. And I just saw that the UN issued a new report on the number of world refugees. People have been displaced through poverty, environmental devastation, and wars, many of which are fueled by U.S. imperialism. And you can't understand the environmental crisis with who is the world's largest producer of oil and natural gas in the world. Can someone answer that? The U.S., right? It was, I'd done a lot of writing on refugees, but 10 years ago, the number was somewhere 65 million a year. Now it's 120 million, the latest report. This is the world that we're living in. And, this is not directed at you. Please, Stacey, we've gotten to know each other more recently, right? But, there's a phenomenon of U.S. society and how people are trained. And that is that everyone around the world should love Americans. You know what I'm saying? Why don't they love us? Why do they? Well, I was a little kid and my parents took me on a trip to Puerto Rico, and I saw a sign, and it was Yankee Go Home. I was like 12 years old, and I said, Yankee Go Home, and and that sort of sparked some thinking, right? And it's a long history since then. But the point is, and I met Vietnamese when I went to Cuba back, and we broke the embargo, went to Cuba, and I met Vietnamese, fighters, guerrilla fighters, and, it wasn't a matter, did they like me or hate me? They really admired the fact that I was there. But what they were saying is, what are you doing to stop the war? And that's the summoning. What are we doing, to stop this system from carrying out its atrocities? And what are we doing to accelerate the pace of making a revolution so that there will not be a genocide again, never again, right? So, it's not a matter of do people like us, it's are we doing the right thing? And the right thing is to be building this movement for revolution in the belly of the beast here. And, that's, to me, an important lesson from that whole experience. And I remember also a slogan from the Vietnamese struggle. I thought that was interesting, and it was, we must turn our hatred into the energy to fight for liberation. Turn our hatred into energy to fight for liberation. And, there's a certain universality to that. And we have the responsibility and the need to build and make this revolution to emancipate all of humanity so that what we're talking about today, and wow, Alan started the whole film off, on a very provocative footing, right? Which was, Alan and I have been talking a little bit, right? We know each other, right? But, what does it tell us? That people have thrown their hearts and souls into this battle, and they're going up against this Byzantine legal bureaucracy, right? That's all designed to maintain the status quo of who runs society.
Who runs society?
Huh?
Who runs? Is it the corporations?
Are you answering that?
No, I'm asking.
Well, yes, the corporation. Are you going to answer that? Here we have.
Oh man!
Come on. Come on.
I was signing up to speak right after you. Check 1 2. I was signing up to speak right after you. I got the microphone. Thanks. You want me to answer the question? Should give my attempt to answer? I mean, the problem is that we live in a system, not just a government in this country or in Vietnam as well, or or in South Africa or in the United Kingdom, but where every country around the world lives under a system of capitalism, imperialism, which, as something I've learned from articles like on the Anarchy Organization of Capitalism that Raymond Lotta has written, or many articles from Avakian, or even going back to Marx and others, it's a system where the basic production relations, in other words, all the things that are produced for human survival are only produced insofar as they can profit a small capitalist ruling bourgeoisie class. And what that actually means in a practical sense is things are not done to meet human need. Even the things that are for human need, like, for example, agriculture, which needs to be preserved by herbicides that end up killing millions of people, or the things that we need to keep our bodies free from safe from the elements, like clothing, are made in sweatshops in Vietnam or other places around the world. Everything is done insofar as that it can be. So it's not just that some people get some of the profits, not just the haves and the have-nots, that people reap some of the profits of this horrible system, but things are only produced insofar as they profit a small group, of people around the world, and it's done in a totally insane, inefficient, oppressive, anarchic way, which brings me to, since I have the microphone, one of the things that I thought that really, is a very powerful film and very frustrating, But to me, that one of the things that's very related to this point is, and what I'm about to say, I'm not going to make a rule that said it would be impossible to, but think for a second why this system, yes, concentrated, these blocks of capitalists, concentrated as corporations, but why they couldn't take or can't take responsibility for the soul-crushing and literal murder of billions of people around the world, and how, you understand what I'm saying? It's not just some judges here or those 10,000 corporate lawyers, over there, or finance departments here, but, or why they continue. If we were to have a new socialist republic, for example, in any country around the world, and hopefully multiple countries, and you developed something that would try to help people, like, for example, an herbicide, to preserve agriculture, to feed people. And there was enough people saying, I think this at the very least isn't working, but actually might also be, not just helping to feed people, but actually killing people. You would probably give the benefit of the doubt to that, more than assumption, but that hypothesis, or that brought forward by scientists and others. You wouldn't put that under the rug. You might actually change some pretty fundamental things about how you were feeding people at a certain time, because the whole point of your society would be to actually preserve future generations and not murder people. This is the anarchy and insanity of capitalism. And I would just add one. No, I'll say it later because I'm just supposed to.
We also want to get other people.
Was that helpful, or was that was in? You put me on the spot. Yeah. Wasn't my question.
Wasn't your question? Well, we'll get to your question.
Yeah, Alan, you were going to say something, and then I want to open it up to other people too.
Extremely briefly, but illustrative of the point that you were just making so eloquently. I saw Madame Tron go through a transition. When we first began working with her and interviewing her, she had a fantasy, and she speaks of it in the film. If she could bring guys from Monsanto into one of those care centers for the afflicted, she thought that they would be, their consciences would be so stricken that they would want to change their ways. She does not entertain that kind of fantasy anymore. She wants to kick their asses.
You should update them on that. We should update you on the process of her trial, because you all went, at the end of the film. That was old news in 2021. But go ahead, fill them in.
Well, just as Judge Weinstein did in dismissing the two U.S. cases, the veterans and then the people of Vietnam who brought suit remarkably and heroically here, and he kicked that case out as well. The French government dismissed Madame Tran's case.
7 years.
After 7 years of hearings, saying this case does not belong with us because it was the result of an international conflict, and this court does not deal with the initiatives of other countries.
But they changed the magistrate right in the middle.
Tran has appealed and fought, and her lawyers, as well as Jonathan Moore, who helped assist them and who pressed the cases in the U.S. Madame Tran's appeal will be ruled on in the coming week, and she is holding her breath.
I hope it comes out in the paper. There would be some kind of.
Oh, there definitely will be.
It's in August?
It's in August.
Oh, it's in August. She's got
They put it off?
They pushed it to
Oh,
August. First it was June 7th,
okay.
and now it's okay.
I'm awash in time, and I would rely on Wong's sense of timing.
But they're waiting for her to die, as she said.
The one,
She's not going to die.
if she wins, it will be cataclysmic.
Other questions, comments?
Listen, very powerful emotionally, as you said. And I have to remember the 10,000 people in Bhopal, India, who were massacred on December 3rd, 1984 by Union Carbide, later taken over by Dow Chemical. One of the things that really, and I'd like you to speak more about this, it felt like there was a real spirit of internationalism among, some of the people in Oregon, some of the Vietnamese, people in France. Maybe you can talk a little more about that. And I just want to say, I've driven through Douglas and Lincoln counties. It's the Oregon coast, the beautiful Oregon coast. I didn't have any real idea that this was going on in the way that it's depicted in the film.
Oh, did you not see the Balded Mountains, the Balded Hills?
No,
everything?
sure, but all you think that's clear cut. Yeah, you see clear cut all the time, but you don't realize that they're spraying Agent Orange on it, and that all these people are getting killed or maimed, and that all these people are fighting and resisting. And anyway, I just, it's
Oh, okay. Why don't you?
No, because I don't have all the proof.
I don't know if this is, it's amplifying. Kate was urging.
At the beginning of what you said about Bhopal bought by Dow, I immediately thought about what happened with Monsanto was picked up by Bayer.
And the effects of that are still felt today, the people of Bhopal.
Larry wrote a book on Bhopal.
A huge atrocity for which there has never been any restitution and could never be. How can you make up for the negligent or even deliberate loss of life that resulted from that incident? Kate was urging me, though she was on the verge of doing so quite ably.
I just like that the way that you get to these corporations is through their pockets, through the stock market. So what's very interesting is that there have been masses and masses of lawsuits against glyphosate, Roundup. And it was targeted at Monsanto. And it got to be at least 15,000. What was in the last count? I remember a count last summer. It was 15,000 lawsuits that were going out.
Many more now.
Oh, many more. And people, and the courts wanted, or maybe the chemical companies wanted to make it one big class action. like they did for the vets, and then settle it once and nobody can say anything else after that? Well, no, the court said no. We're going to hear every one of these 15,000. So meanwhile, Bayer has this toxic asset of Monsanto in its hands and in its stocks, and its stocks are tanking like this. You want to finish this story?
Just to say the stock market is punishing Monsanto.
Oh, but Bayer for taking that toxic asset.
Bayer is Monsanto. Bayer bought Monsanto.
So the only way to get at these corporations
and
is
you
that
guys,
way.
Yeah, and you guys saw the poison papers that were compiled by, in part, Carol Van Sherman and others as part of this project that help create some of the basis, the lawsuits that are punishing Monsanto today. So this work, the research work matters. These documentaries, it's backed by a lot of research. Like these guys put themselves out there for potential lawsuits, and
we had to cover our tracks like crazy. We had to bring in a lawyer who told us to not name any of the chemical companies because that's what's it called, Anna? What's it called?
You can defame a product. We never knew that, and it was easy and low-hanging fruit to criticize the herbicides, and the lawyers, particularly from institutions like PBS that have to guard their backsides, and they are liable for loss too. They insisted that we hold back on certain branding. Daryl Ivey, when he's showing the pamphlets.
He's showing. You can almost see it if you recognize the but I had to take out the words that he put in there.
Outside the decontaminations.
We had to add out of focus on all of the cans so you couldn't read it. So once in a while I gave you 2,4-D, just so the little, come on, stay with me on this, because that's not a brand. That's a chemical.
But ultimately, for us, we'd be very happy if these companies did bring a lawsuit, because then they'd have to go to court. And then information will come out. So actually, I think PBS is worried, but we're not worried. Yes.
It's a very good point, Juan.
Yeah,
they don't want the shame to be adjudicated.
Yeah, this is the kind of discussion and debate that we like to open up here at Revolution Books. Is that is that a viable strategy? But let me give a metaphor here, okay? And Carl can chime in on this. But the city of New York, when it draws up its budget, okay, allocates a specific amount of funds, and they are enormous, to cover the costs of lawsuits against the NYPD, the New York Police Department. In other words, it is factored into the functioning of this city, okay, that the police are going to murder black and brown youth. That's just factored in to how this city and how this society runs, okay? And they have created an elaborate structure by which people can litigate. Okay, and Carl has been an advocate and worked very closely with the families of those who have been murdered, and I'm going to say it, by these pigs. Okay, and that's a just battle that's waged, but it goes on and on and on. The murder, of youth by these police, and New York City has this kitty, a legal fund that is set in motion once a case comes before it. And not only that, they project ahead. So they're building new facilities to train more murderous cops, right? They have their community relations people that go into the neighborhoods, right, to suck people into this. And then they have their legal mechanisms through which you can be compensated for the loss of your loved one. And, go look at the numbers, right? It is astonishing. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, right, These get paid out. It's the quote unquote cost of doing business. Okay? It's the cost of running this society in the way that it is. And they, and this is not in any way, I mean, I was crying the first time I saw this film, Madame Tron. I just have to say, when you see this woman and her history, and when she is like, I don't even want to go through it, because people saw the film, right? We have to get rid of this system, okay? And it has all these means by which it preserves itself, right? And at the end of the day, it is their control over, it is a state apparatus, an instrumentality of force and violence, right, that is set in motion when they meet resistance, of a certain scale. So I just think that, there was a famous, General Motors did a calculation of how much they would lose through lawsuits, and they figured out the cost of doing business for people that died on the road of unsafe at any speed. And you can just go through all this. I don't care, what the corporation is. This is all built into that functioning, right? So, on the one hand, it is righteous when people, demand restitution, right? And what's really incredibly important is to unmask both the crimes of these motherfuckers and the lies through which they carry out those crimes, all their public relations, all their bogus scientists. I mean, that dude, in the film, right? I don't even want to talk about that, right? So like, yeah, I mean, I kind of felt like maybe I should drink some Agent Orange. It's just so benign. So, but look, I think people hear what I'm saying, that metaphor of how New York runs the police, right? So we should just, sort of come to grips with this reality, right? And then we'll be back for more discussion about the strategy for making this revolution. And we're really trying to make a leap this summer in putting this revolution on the map, bringing people into this revolution, young and old, all the experience that we see in this room. And we want to have Alan and Kate and Huang back. And I just want to, again, on behalf of Revolution Books, thank you for the work that you've done. Thank Huang for the involvement in this film. Really glad that I got to meet all of you and go to Huang's classes. And, this is the resource that Revolution Books is. Your film is an incredible resource for the people of the world. And when we show it at Revolution Books, we have a certain kind of conversation, that we try to raise people's sights to the need and possibility for a revolution. The world does not have to be this way.
Thank you, Raymond. And maybe just to add to all the stuff that you've been saying, there's actually a very concrete connection between all that you've said and our film. You guys, I don't know if you recognize him. This guy, Jonathan Moore. Mm-hmm. He is the recipient of one of the largest ever payouts that the city has ever had to pay for the wrongdoing of the NYPD.
Oh, the Central Park 5.
Yeah, he was the lawyer representing the Central Park 5.
That's why he was
Great civil
It
rights
was familiar to you.
I had seen him, but I had no idea that he was. And just one thing I'll add to what Raymond raised.
Good, Stacey. Bye.
One thing I'll add to what Raymond raised. The year that Amadou Diallo was murdered by the police in the 41 shots, there was a historic payout made that year, which did not bust the amount in the budget that had already been put aside.
Oh my God. Does it go from one year to the next?
No, they renew it every year. They project what it's going to be like, and they have never had to come up with emergency money because they've always projected enough, including around the Central Park 5. It didn't bust it there either. And that is like it's built into the functioning of this goddamn system. And on one level, they could never repay people for the damages done when they steal the lives of your children, your family members, your loved ones. But this is actually this is a part of how they work. Oh, okay, we got to set aside this much money because mostly we're going to get away with these murders that our police carry out. Every now and then we'll get caught. We'll come in with a settlement. That'll take care of it. And the point is, taking care of that horror can only be done by getting rid of this goddamn system. That's the reality to what Raymond was talking about. And that's the challenge that's before us, and also underscored by the way things are coming to a head and going up for grabs. Gives added urgency to that. So really dig into Bob Avakian, official, like I said, and see what he has to say about all this. And, you know, get with us around Revolution Summer 2024 in this movement for a real revolution that we're working on.
All right, so I think we're going to, if you guys want any closing words, but it's getting on 10. I know people got to...
Oh, my God, no.
Yeah. All right, so one last round of applause for Alan and Kate.